My wife was a mistake, and I will not repeat it. I touched him on the shoulder, and when he turned around, I hit him with everything I had. I dropped all 205 pounds I had in him. I felt his nose crunch and blood flow, and when he raised his hands to his face, I stamped my fist into his belly and let out a loud oof as he folded in two. Another blow to the head, and he fell to the ground. I contemplated kicking the asshole half a dozen more times, but then decided, he gets the point. I turned to Darcy and said, I think I broke his nose. Maybe you can kiss it and make it better. And then turned and walked away from the woman who wore my wedding ring and the man who was my best friend. It was Darcy's sister's birthday party, and it was being held at Barney's Roadhouse restaurant. We huddled around one table drinking, dancing to live music, and everyone was having a great time. We had been there for a little over 2 hours when something caught my eye. My girlfriend Darcy was dancing with my best friend Mark, and while this was nothing new, what caught my attention was that his hand slid down her back and rested on her ass, and she didn't push it away or say anything to him. Then I noticed Mark's foot pressed against Darcy's leg, and again she did nothing. By then they both had piqued my interest, and I moved to watch them while introducing myself as talking to the others at the table. The music stopped, and it took a few seconds before they realized it and dispersed. They returned to the table, and even though they were sitting on opposite sides and 4 chairs apart, I kept catching their glances. In the next set, I danced with Darcy, and putting my arm around her, I asked, Is everything okay? Yeah. Why? You're kind of aloof tonight. It's like your thoughts are somewhere else, or you have something heavy on your mind. It's just your imagination, babe. There's nothing wrong with me, honestly. We stayed on the dance floor for 3 songs and then went back to the table. After a couple minutes, Mark asked Darcy to dance, and I kept my eyes on them. They danced close again, and his hand ended up on her ass. This time, Darcy must have said something because he quickly pulled her away and threw a quick glance in my direction. Half an hour later, Darcy got up to go to the bathroom, and a minute or so later, Mark got up and headed towards the bathrooms. I'd seen enough of this night to make me suspicious, so I waited a couple minutes and then got up and headed toward the restrooms. Mark wasn't in the restroom, and since we would have passed each other if he had gone back to the table, that meant he must have gone out the back door. As I reached for the doorknob, I suddenly realized that if Mark and Darcy were up to something, my going out the back door would alert them and give them a chance to disperse, and then say they'd just gone outside to get away from the cigarette smoke and get some fresh air. I walked back through the bar, out the front door, and moving as quietly as possible, walked around the building. As I rounded the northeast corner of the bar, I saw them. They were hugging each other and kissing. They were so engrossed in each other that they didn't even hear me coming up behind them. I was just finishing putting all of Darcy's stuff that was in my apartment into trash bags when I heard someone standing at the front door. The key going into the lock told me it was Darcy. I didn't look up from what I was doing when she walked in, but said, "You're just in time to take that trash away. I was just about to drop it off in the parking lot." "Can we talk about this?" "No. I've seen enough today to tell you all I need to know." "It wasn't what you think it was." "It doesn't matter, Darcy. I saw what I saw, and that was enough." "You broke Mark's nose and dislocated his jaw." "He was lucky. I must have hit him half a dozen times and broken a couple ribs." "I've never seen you aggressive before." "Sometimes it's good not to see. Now please get your stuff and leave." "Please, Rob. I made a stupid mistake. I had too much to drink and I wasn't thinking straight." "Yeah? It's a good thing I caught you making a mistake like that before the wedding and not after." "Please, Rob, it didn't mean anything. Honestly." "As soon as you said yes and put my ring on Darcy, you were supposed to become a single woman and that man was supposed to be me. You just showed me that I can't trust you. Just get your things and leave." Tears streamed down her cheeks as she began to remove her wedding ring. "Keep it," I told her. I don't want it to remind me of you. If you keep it, Mark won't have to buy you one just like it. Consider it my wedding present. She picked up 2 bags of trash and headed for the door. As she opened the door, she turned to me and said, "I'm sorry, Rob. I love you, I really do, and I didn't do what you think I did." And then she left. She called me the next day and asked if I would be willing to talk to her, and I hung up on her. She made half a dozen more attempts, but I always hung up on her, and eventually she gave up. Over the next month, Mark made a dozen attempts to get me to talk to him, and finally I told him that if he came within arm's length of me, I would put him in the hospital for a month, and he finally figured it out and stopped calling. 8 months later, Darcy and Mark were married. I laughed when I got the invitation. Maybe I was supposed to be something old. As a geologist working for an oil company, I had to travel a lot, and some of the trips were long. Shortly after Mark and Darcy got married, I was sent on a business trip to Alaska to explore the possibility of developing a new oil field. It took almost 11 months, and since I had no one to return home to, I stayed there for the entire 11 months. When I had free time, I would go sightseeing in Alaska or Canada. Did I think about Darcy on cold nights? Yes, I did. I thought about her a lot. I loved her with all my heart, and I was sure she felt the same way about me. We met by chance, literally. I wasn't paying proper attention to my driving and crashed into her car in the parking lot. She wasn't around, so I wrote my name and office number on a piece of paper and stuck it under the windshield wiper. 3 hours later, I got a call from the receptionist saying a woman had come to see me. "She says you're expecting her." I checked my calendar and didn't see any appointments for that day, but I didn't have anything important to do, so I told Fran to send the woman to my office. 2 minutes later, my office door opened, and in walked the most beautiful woman I had ever seen. If there is such a thing as love at first sight, that's exactly what happened to me at that moment. "Mr. Ellison, I'm Darcy Miller, and I'm here to accept your proposal." "My offer? I'm afraid I don't understand." "Oh, wasn't that the dinner invitation you left under my windshield wiper blade? Although I think driving into my car is a bit of an extreme way to get to know me." "An invitation to dinner? I suppose it was probably just a way to contact me so you could give me your insurance information, but I saw the look on your face when I walked in, so I figured I'd treat it as an invitation to dinner." It was all a little too fast for a guy like me, but I wasn't dead, so I finally managed to gather my thoughts and say, "Are you free tonight?" She was free, and 3 days later, as I walked her to the door after a date, she bestowed on me a kiss that made my knees go weak, then took me by the tie and pulled me into her apartment. "I don't know if you felt the same way I did when I walked into your office," she said, "but I can tell by the look on your face that you did. And I don't want to wait another dozen dates while you try to force yourself to get me into bed." We lay there, holding each other and relaxing in the warm aftertaste of great lovemaking, and I asked, "What size ring do you wear?" "My ring size? Why do you want to know that?" "I want to buy you an engagement ring in the morning, and I need to know the size." "Are you proposing to me?" "Hey, you're the one who doesn't believe in wasting time. I'm just following your lead." 5.5. We set a date, but before that could happen, it was night at Barney's. It wasn't until I got home that I learned Mark and Darcy's marriage hadn't lasted that long. Turns out Mark had a hidden side that no one knew about. He was violent. After he sent Darcy to the hospital emergency room for the 5th time, she decided she'd had enough and hit him over the head with a cast-iron skillet, and while he was in the hospital with a broken cheekbone, moved out and filed for divorce. I found out about all this while having dinner with my cousin Richard and his wife Dee. "Are you going to call her?" Dee asked. "Good God, no. Why do you even ask?" "Because in a way, you're responsible for what happened between them." "How can that be? I haven't even been here 11 months. I left town before they even got back from their honeymoon. All their fights were about you." "Come on, Dee. They both disappeared from my life a full 8 months before I went to Alaska. How could I have been part of their problems? Mark is a loser, Rob. You either haven't noticed it or you've accepted it because he's been your best friend since 3rd grade, but he's a loser. He can't hold down a job, can't do anything worthwhile, and every time he came home after being fired, laid off, or having messed something up, Darcy would shake her head in disgust and say something like, "And I lost Rob because of it." The last time he had sent her to the ER, they had been at the Elks Club and he had just lost another job. It's not known if he quit or was fired, but he was whining about how the foreman was sick of him, and Darcy told him to stop whining like a child and man up for a change. Mark made a smart remark that she wouldn't know a man if he bit her in the ass, and she said, "That's where you're wrong. I had a real man once and I blew it." Picking on Rob again? He was 5 times better on his worst day than you could have been on your best day. "You fool!" shouted Mark, and hit her from behind with such force that she fell back in her chair and hit her head on the edge of a nearby table. This knocked her out, and she was rushed to the hospital. 2 days later, she used a frying pan against him. From what I've heard, she hasn't been going on any dates since she moved out and filed for divorce. That's all very interesting, but I guess I won't be saying hello to Darcy. Haven't you ever made any mistakes, Rob? I've made a few. But the thing about mistakes is that you have to learn from them, and what you have to learn is how not to make the same mistake again. Darcy was a mistake, and I won't make it again. And I meant it. I missed Darcy, and not a week went by that I didn't think of her half a dozen times. I still carried her picture in my wallet, but I had no intention of seeing Darcy or even talking to her on the phone. She was history. And while I couldn't get her out of my mind, she was going to remain history. But sometimes what you want or don't want to do just doesn't mean anything in the grand scheme of things. It was a long day at the office, and I stopped by Ernie's Sports Bar and Grill for a couple glasses of long neck and to relax. I stopped by Ernie's because I was dating a waitress named Juanita. We'd been dating for about a month, nothing that would lead to anything, just good buddies in bed. I was sitting in a booth, sipping a beer and watching the Rockies and Giants game on the big screen TV when Juanita put another mug of beer in front of me. "Compliments of the lady at the end of the bar?" I looked at the end of the bar and almost said, "It's not a lady, it's just Darcy." But I didn't. But I didn't turn down the beer either. Darcy took the fact that I didn't turn down the beer as an invitation to join me, and after a couple minutes she lowered herself into the seat across from me. "How are you doing, Rob?" "Fine." "How is it in Alaska?" "Cold." She was quiet for a couple seconds, then asked, "Have your feelings for me softened?" "In what way?" "Do you still hate me?" "I never hated you, Darcy. Was I disappointed in you?" "Yes. But I never hated you." "I'm sorry about what happened, Rob. I really am. I've really done some stupid things in my life, and Mark is at the top of that list. But I swear to you, Rob, that there was never anything between Mark and me other than what I thought was innocent flirting. I didn't know Mark looked at it as anything else. You know Mark. He's always been a touchy person, and yes, he put his hand on my ass a couple of times, but I know you saw it and didn't say anything, and it didn't hurt anything. It was just Mark being Mark. He was just the way he's always been." "That's not what I saw in the parking lot, Darcy." "You never let me tell you what happened, Rob. You just assumed the worst and turned your back on me. How can what I saw be anything other than what I saw?" "I got up and went to the bathroom, and when I came out, Mark was waiting for me in the hallway. He said he needed to talk to me about something and asked me to go outside where it wasn't so noisy. When we got outside, he said, 'I'm making a mistake marrying you, that you can't love me as much as he does.' He said I should break up with him and become his girlfriend. I laughed at him and told him he was crazy. He grabbed me and hugged me and kissed me, and then I was stupid. I kissed him back. I have no excuse except that I'd had a lot to drink, and my ego was stroked by the realization that he wanted me. And besides, what's a kiss? And then you came along and my life turned to garbage. 8 months later, you married him. You'd probably be surprised how many friends you have. You kicked me out of the house and everyone found out I did bad things to you and no one wants anything to do with me. Mark loved me and no one else cared, so when he asked me to marry him, I said yes. Another stupid mistake. I sent you an invitation in the vain hope that you would show up and interfere with the wedding. How would I have done that? When it came to the point where the priest asked if there was anyone who knew why the union should not take place, I hoped you would be there to speak up and say, "Yes, I know, because it's not him I love, it's you." But you didn't. That would have been the truth, Rob. I knew, even when I said I love, that I loved you and always will. Deep down, I knew I was making a mistake marrying Mark. I should have turned and run from the church when they reached the "Do you, Darcy, take Mark" part of the ceremony, but I didn't have the courage. I wasn't lying when I told you I loved you the night you threw me out of your apartment. So why are you telling me this, Darcy? I want you back in my life, Rob. Even if we never go back to the way things were, I need you to be a part of my life, if only as a friend. As I sat and listened to her, I thought about what she had said. Mark was a very touchy-feely guy, and she and Mark flirted a lot, but Darcy flirted with a lot of guys. Flirting was in her nature. What bothered me was the kiss. The image of Mark and Darcy embracing each other lingered in my mind. Suddenly, I realized it wasn't the kiss itself that bothered me. It was the embrace, the way they hugged each other. I'd gotten carried away more than once, especially at Christmas parties when you could play with mistletoe, but I'd never hugged the women I kissed. I never hugged them the way Darcy and Mark hugged each other. But maybe I was making too much sense of it? Did I really not realize exactly what I was seeing? Was I angry and furious? And in my anger I read more into it than was actually there? Could it have happened the way Darcy claimed? Darcy sat there waiting to hear what I had to say. But what could I say? I knew I still loved her. I knew I missed her. But the question was whether I dared to take the risk. That kiss, that hug would always be with me. The only thing I knew for sure was that I didn't know what to do. So I took the easy way out. You've given me something to think about, and while I'm not entirely sure I could ever bring myself to accept your version of what happened, I'll give it some thought. Maybe I'll call you in a couple days. I saw the disappointment on her face, but she replied, "At least it's something. It's more than what I had when I came here tonight and saw you sitting here. My cell phone number is still the same. Feel free to call me any time of the day or night. I mean it, Rob. I still love you and I really want you back in my life." She stood up and left me to sit and watch her walk away. I was waiting for Juanita to get home from work and was driving her home to her apartment when she said, "Do I need to start looking for a new playmate?" "Why are you thinking about that?" "I saw the way you looked at that woman who joined you in the stall. More than that, I saw the way she looked at you." "She's just an acquaintance of mine." "Nonsense, Rob. There was something strong between you two, and it was obvious to anyone who can read signs. Tell me honestly, honey, how much time do I have?" "I'm not going anywhere." She fell silent and just looked at me for a while. Then she said, "No, honey, you just don't know it yet." She slid over to me saying, "But I still have you for a while." Once in her apartment, she quickly undressed and said, "Hurry up, honey. I want to have sex with you before you leave." "Stop saying that. I'm not going anywhere," I said, and wondered why she was so sure of that. As I undressed, I also wondered why Juanita and I had never interacted except as sex buddies, and almost immediately I realized I already knew the answer. She was fun to be with. She was an attractive-looking woman, and she loved making love to me, but I just didn't like her. I liked her, really liked her, but I didn't love her. "You know what I want in a lover," she said, and I understood. After another round of sex, I kissed her goodnight and went to my house. As I drove, I wondered why I started thinking about Darcy during sex with Juanita. I had never done that before. Since I had broken up with Darcy, there had been half a dozen women I had slept in the same bed with, and not once had thoughts of Darcy visited me. Then, as Darcy was back in my thoughts, I started thinking about what Darcy had said earlier at Ernie's. Was it true? Could I have believed her? In my anger that night, did I read more into what I saw than was really there? If we got back together, would I always wonder that, and, as a consequence, always suspect her? That's what it all came down to. Trust. That's what relationships require. Trust. A relationship cannot succeed if every time you break up you wonder what the other person is doing. It can't work if every time your loved one came home late, you wondered where they had been or what they were doing. It couldn't work if the other person called and canceled a date, leaving you wondering what they were doing instead and possibly with whom. That was the question in front of me as I thought about Darcy and what she had told me. Could I trust her? Even as I asked myself that question, I knew there was only one way to find out. I slept the usual exhausted and tired sleep I always slept after an evening with Juanita. On my way to work, I stopped at Bob's Big Boy, had breakfast, and when I got to the office, I picked up the phone, called Darcy, and asked her to meet me at Barney's Roadhouse at 6. She said she would be there. I was already seated at a table when she walked in, and there was a look of hope on her face as she approached me. As soon as she sat down, I got straight to the point. "So what do you want, Darcy? To meet up once in a while?" "That would be nice, Rob. But you know what I want. I want you back in my bed where you belong. No strings attached. Dinner and dancing will be appreciated, but the bottom line is that I want you back in my bed." "So you're proposing a friends with privileges relationship?" "Call it what you want, Rob, but I need you back in my life." "No commitment?" "None." "What time can I call you this week?" "There's no better time than now, Rob. My apartment, your apartment, a motel, your backseat or mine. But now, right now, is the best time." I tossed the 10 on the table, stood up, and followed Darcy out of the bar. I have no idea how this is going to turn out. It'll depend on whether I can learn to trust her again. It might take some time, if it takes any time at all, but we're both young, so we have time. The end. Subscribe to my channel. Thank you.